I run Ray Family Farms. We are a hydroponic and microgreens company. I was asked here today by Hetty and your teacher to kind of give you a little rundown on what we do, and that we do food from hydroponics. Everybody know what hydroponics is? Perfect, awesome. So it is ever expanding, hydroponics. They're finding different ways to grow, different medias to grow in. What we use is a hemp mat. You guys can check it out if you'd like to. There's a little piece there for you guys. Something I want to share with the people behind you as well. That we source it from a company in Canada. It is actually like, let's say corn. After they take the corn off, then you have a bunch of stalks. That's a bunch of waste. So that's actually an industrial hemp that they have used for making wood or clothing products, things like that. And that is what would be the waste, your stalks and things like that. They clean it, sew it all together. There's a number of different medias that you can do it in. Unfortunately, I do not have a bunch of those. This is a different media. You guys can kind of pass it around. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of squishy. It acts kind of like a home's insulation in a way. It is made up of minerals that have been kind of spun like cotton candy and then compressed. So that way it has different minerals available to the plant. That's the biggest problem you have when you do hydroponics. There is nutrients and other things that are in the soil that the plant needs to live. So you've got about 6 that are your macronutrients. 3 of those nutrients they actually get from air and water, so you don't have to worry about those 3. The other 3 would be the ones that you would have to supplement if you're not going to use soil. Anybody know what those would be? No? She hasn't gone over the NPK with you yet? NPK is kind of the standard for your fertilizers. You can see it here on some of these that they actually have 3 numbers on there. So your N is your nitrogen, which would be your first number. It's always listed first. The second one would be phosphorus. That is your second number. And the third would be potassium. Depending on what the numbers are, they always go in the same order. It's always NPK. Depending on the number is depending on how much of that nutrient is percentaged into that solution. Okay, so you got a 433 here, so your nitrogen would be 4% of the whole bottle. And then phosphorus and potassium would both be your 3s. And then the rest of that solution was what they call a micronutrient. Not all plants would need it. It would be more of like a supplemental thing. Maybe it'll help with blooming or fruiting. Depending on the plant and what stage it's at, you would want to give it a certain solution to actually help it with its progression. As far as your nitrogen, it helps with a number of things. Faster growth is probably the one thing that you would notice the most. And it also helps actually green the plant up. We do a lot of different varieties that are actually grown in the dark the whole time. So it's considered like a blanched. Usually gives it more of a sweeter taste. It doesn't actually go through the photosynthesis. It doesn't ever green. Your phosphorus, your number 2, that is going to be more of like a flowering stage, something that produces fruit or flowers. It would help with that a lot. It also helps the root system get stronger, actually grab a hold of something. And then, of course, your potassium is kind of a general, helps everybody. It's needed for the plant to live, of course. And then it will also help strengthen the cell walls and things like that. And then the coolest thing that I can show you today would be how we do this. Now, we do kind of I would say the introduction to hydroponics with the way that our system is ran. There's a lot of different styles of hydroponics, but this would probably be your basic. The cool thing is we do 2 trays, so you can actually see the root system underneath there. And the hemp, of course, is on top. You seed it, and then and the roots come down through the bottom, and then all you do is put water in the bottom. We've got, here is a tray that we've been working on that's only a couple of days old. This would be like your germination process. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of that. I can't really tip it very well just because I don't want too much water to get slushed around. But you can see the seeds have started. It's starting to root a little bit. It's actually starting some growth. Probably the next day we will pull it underneath the lights, and that'll add the green and help them actually grow towards the light, give them a stretch. Something a little different, kind of crazy. At least with the hydroponics and the hemp mat, you can actually see everything that's going on. Unlike soil, you know, all of a sudden it's, oh, there it is. So this would be a tray that has nothing before we plant, just so you guys can kind of see, you know, that same hemp mat. And then we have an awesome mesh bottom. This is great for your root system, just so that way everybody can get a chance to get through. And then just your storage container for your water, of course. So we would throw these together here, throw this down, and then go ahead and just seed right on the top, and then give it some water, put it in the dark for at least 3 to 5 days, sometimes 7, depending on the variety of seed that you're working with. I brought some different seeds so you guys can kind of see them. You know, not all of them are going to be like, oh my goodness, but that's kind of your small seed here, and then you get some crazy different shapes. You guys can hand those around when you get done looking at them. And then of course, depending on your seed is going to depend on how you start the plant's life. Some of the seeds, like let's say a pea, they retain a lot of water, same with cilantro. So that's something you want to soak before you actually plant the seed. If not, it could take you maybe 3 or 4 more days of getting that seed to actually get enough water to where it will sprout. Since it is an easier thing to do, microgreens, the nice thing about the microgreen is the seed actually has all the nutrients in it. So all of this stuff you would not need at all. You don't need any nutrients until you're about 3, maybe 4 weeks in on the seed, and then it kind of runs out on its own. That's when you'd have to kind of supplement it and help it along. Since it is an easier process to do, we do a little grow-at-home kit for everybody. It makes a good present, of course, at Christmas time. You get the nice little tray. It's kind of like, you know, a scaled-down version of the big trays that we use. And then we've got the hemp mats that go right in there. And then you get a couple different kinds of seed that you can sprinkle. You kind of mixing them up if you'd like to, get some different flavors. And then instructions, of course, very easy to follow. Just getting it wet every maybe 12 hours and then keeping it in the dark, or putting it underneath some artificial light or some window seal light. They don't need much light to grow. The microgreen doesn't. It's very nice that way, so you could do it on your window seal. Going back to hydroponics as a general, they've actually been around for many years, probably longer than anybody would actually be able to even fathom. They actually have signs that the Egyptians did a lot of hydroponics back in the day. The Aztecs in Mexico did a lot of hydroponics. Depending on the situation that you are, you know, not everybody has soil that's available to them. And then also we're finding out that soil loses those nutrients, so you'd have to replenish those, maybe do a cover crop just so that way it can give nutrients back to the ground. As far as, you know, in our, or at least in some of our time frames, hydroponics has become very big. They actually used them during World War II, the Army, military, all the sorts. When they were staged on the Pacific Islands, it was a way to bring fresh produce to the soldiers without having to plant major crops in fields. And you also have the possibility of being at war, that food could get damaged being out. You know, people could see it, they could poison it, things like that. Another big move for hydroponics was when NASA decided that they would look at it as for a way to grow food if we were to, you know, habitat the moon. The nicest thing about hydroponics compared to soil would be you're roughly 50% less water wasted It's only taking the water that it needs rather than actually getting all the soil wet for just those couple of seeds. Once you get into a little further than that, there's actually aeroponics, which actually uses even less water. They say hydroponics is about 50% compared to soil, and aeroponics is about 30% of water actually used compared to soil. So it does save on a lot of that. The best thing for hydroponics, it actually has less water wasted. It can help actually bring cleaner air, water, soil, and of course food to everybody's table. A system like this where it's a lot smaller, this would be like our grow at home kit if you were to do it on your counter. The best thing would be is that you have your food right there. That would be like a hyper fresh or ultra fresh, just so that way it'd be like having a tomato garden outside. Rather than going to the store and actually buying tomatoes, you can just go outside and pick a couple. You know exactly what that plant has been through the whole time, and that way you can feel good about knowing that you're eating something that has been cleanly done or cared for in the way that you would want. We do have some samples that we could go through today that you guys are more than welcome to try. We've got a broccoli, a cabbage, a mustard, and a radish. The radishes get kind of crazy. They're probably one of the taller crops that we do. Kind of going back to the different mediums that you could use. There's actually a lot of different ones out there, depending on, of course, what type of plant you're going to grow. You see a lot of the larger plants when they do like a lettuce or a basil, things like that they use expanded clay aggregate. So it's a clay that they've actually heated up, and it kind of pops like a popcorn. So when they do that, it becomes very porous and will actually hold a lot of water retention, so that way the plant can pull the water off of those rocks. There's a perlite, which is a volcanic rock that is kind of done the same way. There's also a vermiculite, which is a mineral that has been through the same process, kind of heated up and popped, and it's very porous and actually holds onto the water very well. There's some other crazy ones. More common one would be for that I've seen microgreens done in is a cocoa core. So it would be the outside husks of coconuts that they've actually shredded, and you can actually, it acts just like a soil. So you'd spread it, pack it, put your seeds in. It's just a different resource. There is some crazy ones out there that people have tried. Gravel is a common one. It doesn't sound like it, but it would be. And then depending on the style you have, this tray here, being that is a total mesh bottom, depending on the seed, as long as the seed isn't big enough to fall through it, you could actually just plant the seed in this, and all you'd have to do is water it. It doesn't need any soil at all, no medium. It would just be the root system that you would see on the bottom. Kind of like when I opened that tray there, kind of that same look to it, kind of weaves and everybody goes kind of crazy. Unfortunately, these are kind of small, so they still have the hemp underneath it.
What made you choose hemp specifically?
Being that we are a home-based business, plus of course, 50% of the time, there's a chance of it being extremely cold outside. So with the thought of actually having to clean the tray, that is probably your biggest, you want to start with a clean system. If you take something that has something else that's been there, a week or two, and you didn't take care of it, and there could be some pathogens in or some molds, things like that, that would actually hurt your other crop that you put back into that system. So just as a cleaner base, we thought we would go towards that route. There is a product called BioStraight, which is actually made out of wood, like fibers, kind of the same as the hemp. We didn't go to that route though because they use a rubber to bind that. And just being that we wanted to be as clean as possible, this is just straight hemp. It's been washed. There is a cotton that they sew it to on the back or that they punch it through, but that would still be a very clean cotton compared to, even if it is an organic rubber. And we felt that the hemp would be sustainable. in the long run, just because it's already a wasted product. If you're not going to use it for what we're using it for, I'm not sure what they would do with it. Maybe turn it into wood, maybe burn it, maybe just compost it back into the ground. That is another very good thing about the hemp mat. It's fully biodegradable. I don't know if you could put it in your compost outside in your home and it would actually work. I think over time it might, but it would be better in a compost facility, of course, a place where they actually work at breaking things like that down.
Jason, I'm just wondering, can you reuse that at all, or you can't?
The hemp mat, unfortunately, you cannot. Even with soil. If you were to grow this as a microgreen tray with soil, after you're done, there still could be pathogen, certain different diseases that retain in that soil, so you still wouldn't want to reuse that either. You'd have to go through a process of actually heating the soil to burn off the pathogens, disease, things like that, and then you would have to mix it with some other things just to give those nutrients back to the soil. All right? So that way, if you start with a clean, fresh slate, then you know exactly where you're going with it. You know that nothing's been played with in there, nothing that you're going to have to try to counter. The biggest step with microgreens would be, since it doesn't need fertilizer, it doesn't need anything like that, no pesticides since you're doing it indoors, would be you need to balance your pH in your water. They are very picky on their pH balance. It has to be between a 5.5 to 6.5. Most of the water that comes out of your faucet would be at about 8, 8.5, depending on your city, depending on what they put into that water. And to help with that, of course, they make some chemicals kind of like these. There are organic chemicals, of course, that does it. You could even use, depending on which way you would have to go on the scale, you could use like a lemon juice, would actually make it more acidic. And then also, if you had to counter the acidicness in the actual water, you could use like a baking soda or something like that, would help calm it down. There's several different ways that you can actually test your pH. We use a very easy way just because we do it so often. Like every other day, we have to mix up a batch of pH balanced water. So this makes it very easy. It just has a little electrode on the bottom. You just turn it on, stick it in the water, give it 30 seconds or so it can dial in exactly where it's at. And then also, when you're dealing with a fertilizer, something like this here, you want to keep track of that. You have to know exactly where you want to be as far as how much fertilizer is in your, let's say, gallon of water. So with that, they actually do a different meter, which is kind of the same setup. It has little electrodes on the bottom, and this one is made to actually tell you how much nutrients are in the water. It's parts per million, or you can do an electrical current style. So depending on how much current runs through that water is how it can tell you how many nutrients are in the water. Most of the fertilizers that you use will actually tell you on the back, depending on the strength that you would want, how much you would want to mix all that to. This is Ocean Solution, which is an organic fertilizer that comes from Florida. It has to deal with different minerals that they actually get out of the sea. These ones here, they say organic on them. They're made by Hydroponic. It's just a different line that they make that says organic. But if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty, this is organic and these are still chemicals.